Hey everybody, Thomas Joseph here with a holiday conundrum for you all. The centerpiece of the table is of course your holiday roast. And in front of me I have a pork roast, but so many people across the nation, they have different types of roast that they feature on their holiday table. Maybe it's a turkey breast or a beef tenderloin or a beef rib roast. The roasts are kind of endless, but the technique is all the same. And there are a few steps along the way that you need to know to have a very successful holiday roast. And I'm gonna show you that today. The number one thing is to dry brine or season your meat in advance, because what this does is it helps the seasoning penetrate into the meat, giving you a really flavorful roast. And for this brine, I'm just gonna use a simple combination of kosher salt, some freshly ground black pepper. It's very important to grind your pepper right before you use it so that it has that spice and that heat. And I'm going to add some rosemary, but this is all interchangeable. You can use rosemary, you can use sage, you can use any of those woodsy herbs. I'm just gonna pick it and kind of put it into the salt and pepper mixture. You could use lemon zest, any citrus zest would be absolutely delicious. So I'm just gonna mix this together with my hands and then liberally sprinkle your mixture over your roast. And then just take your hands and kind of work the salt into and around all sides. And you really have to be generous here because you want this mixture to really penetrate into the meat and give you a really flavorful roast. Now this is a 5-pound pork roast, and this will dry brine overnight or up to 24 hours. If you were using something smaller like a turkey breast, that should only go for maybe 6 to 8 hours. And if you're doing something as big as a rib roast, and this is a 7-pound rib roast here, that is something that could take up to 2 days to brine. So this is gonna go into the refrigerator now. The brining method is all the same, but the length of time depends on the size of the meat. So dry brining, that's the first step in successful roasting. The second is making sure that the meat you have is brought to room temperature before you start the cooking process. So our roast, it's been in the refrigerator overnight. I'm gonna take the dry brine off and just kind of use a paper towel to gently brush off any excess. If you're roasting a turkey or if you're roasting another big cut of meat, sometimes it's helpful to actually rinse off the brine. So now you'll notice that I have the pork roast tied, and what that is, trussing, that's what it's called. When you truss together your roast, it keeps it in a nice, compact, even shape, which promotes even cooking. So make sure that you ask your butcher to truss it, or you should learn how to truss it yourself. I'm going to add a little bit of oil around the roast. So remember, this roast is at room temperature. It's been out of the refrigerator for at least 2 hours, so it's not icy cold when it goes into the pan. If it was icy cold, what would happen is the exterior of the roast would cook too quickly and get dry and crumbly, and the interior wouldn't have a chance to cook. This goes into a preheated pan to start off the caramelization or the crust of the roast. So our pork roast has been searing on just one side, and if you were doing something bigger like a turkey, or if you were doing this prime rib roast here, you could do this step in the oven at a high temperature, like a 450 degrees, and that's what gives a wonderful crust to the exterior. So this looks good, and I just want to sear this on all sides before I put it into an oven. I have my oven preheating to 375 degrees to finish cooking the roast completely. Our roast is nicely browned, and that is our third step. So searing is the third step. I'm just going to remove the roast to a pan here, and I'm gonna place a wire rack in the bottom of my roasting pan. Now you could use a classic roasting pan if you need it for something big like a turkey or a rib roast. This is perfect for the pork roast that I'm using. The rack really helps to encourage even cooking. So the airflow gets underneath the roast, it gets on top of the roast and around the roast, and it cooks evenly and it browns at a nice even rate too. So this is going into the oven at 375 to finish cooking. The roast has been in the oven for an hour and a half, and I'm temping it right in the center of the meat. You want to make sure you use an instant read thermometer, and instead of going directly in overhead, you go in from the side into the thickest part of the meat, and it should register for pork about 135. And what will happen over time, resting, which is the important number 5 step, is that carryover cooking will happen. And so anywhere from 5 to 10 degrees, your roast will go up while it rests. So I'm going to remove this from the pan so it doesn't keep cooking in that hot pan, place it onto your carving board, and rest it for at least 20 minutes for a roast this size, anywhere up to 20 to 30 minutes. And to keep it nice and warm so it doesn't get too cold, you can cover or tent loosely with some aluminum foil. Our roast has been resting for about 20 minutes, and now I'm just going to remove the strings. And now to carve the roast, you don't want to give too big of a piece. I would say a 1/4 of an inch slice is very nice for this pork roast. You can see how wonderfully moist it is. Now, remember those steps. We dry brined. The second step, bringing the roast up to room temperature before cooking. Our third step, searing the meat. And then roasting, of course, at a lower temperature, 375. And then, of course, resting so that all of those wonderful juices stay inside your meat. So there you have it, the 5 steps for mastering your holiday roast. Enjoy.